Hello, and welcome to Civignite University. Civignite is the online home of commercial real estate expertise. My name is Roger Owers. I'm a commercial real estate broker and the co-founder of Civignite Commercial Real Estate. My path to commercial real estate brokerage began with about 5 years as a civil engineer and construction manager, followed by a 15-year career as an attorney. In my law practice, I focused on real estate law, construction law, and Indian law. I now use the experience gained in these professions to help my commercial real estate clients in a wide variety of transactions. I also enjoy sharing some of this experience with you in these videos. Even the most simplest commercial real estate transaction nowadays can still require a lease that's dozens of pages long. Most leases are prepared by the landlord or the landlord's attorney. One of the clauses that's often overlooked in a commercial real estate lease is the notices clause or the notices provision. To help you understand your commercial real estate lease, we're going to take a closer look at the notices provision in this presentation. So here's the roadmap for this presentation. First, we're going to look at who cares about this clause and why is it important. Secondly, we'll take a look at where in a commercial real estate lease or contract the notices clause is typically found. And then third, we'll offer a few tips and suggestions for understanding the notices provision and then applying it for a better understanding in your commercial real estate lease or contract. So let's jump in. First, who cares about this clause and why is it important? The notices provision governs exactly how and when official communications between the parties are supposed to occur. Examples of official communications include big events anticipated by the lease or the contract. Some examples of these big events include the tenant's right to extend the lease, the right to purchase an adjacent space or purchase that space, a party's right to early terminate the lease, and of course the big one is the default situation. The significance of these big events makes it necessary to make sure that both parties are officially communicating and being aware of the communications governing that particular event. It's only fair that both sides be fully apprised of what's going on. A good notices provision then will therefore set out the who, what, when, where, and how of what constitutes an official communication between the parties. As such, strict compliance with those terms is going to be necessary to make sure that a communication will be deemed official under the lease or the contract. So the notices provision is important because it lays out the requirements for what constitutes an official communication between the parties to the commercial real estate lease or contract. What's tricky about the notices provision, though, is that it's usually found near the end of the contract or commercial real estate lease, buried in a bunch of other language that looks to be like boilerplate. However, it's got to be taken seriously and it's got to be followed. In today's world, we have many different choices for communications. So the notices provision can contain a number of different options for how to officially communicate under the lease or the contract. Examples include U.S. mail, and more specifically, is it first class U.S. mail, certified, registered, return receipt requested? Another example might be an overnight carrier such as FedEx or UPS or DHL. Another option might be email or even facsimile or fax machines. Most of the notices provisions that I've seen allow for U.S. mail and for certified U.S. mail in particular with the return receipt requested. Most of the notices provisions that I've seen also allow for delivery via overnight carrier such as FedEx, UPS, or DHL. Here's a sample notices provision that I pulled randomly off the internet. You'll see that it deals with notices or official communications that are to be given or required under the lease. And it says that those communications or notices are to be effective only if rendered or given in writing. They can be sent by certified mail with a return receipt requested, delivered in person, or delivered by a reputable overnight courier such as Federal Express or DHL. You'll also see in here that there's a set of requirements applicable to the tenant, as well as a set of requirements applicable to the landlord. This is a fairly typical notices provision. Okay, so we've talked about why the notices provision is important, where it usually is located in a commercial real estate lease or contract, and we even looked at a sample notices provision. Now I'm going to offer a few tips for dealing with notices provision. Well, the first suggestion should be obvious, but I'm going to go ahead and say it, and that is to read the notices provision and then follow its requirements to a T. We've spent a lot of time in this video explaining how important the notices provision is, so make sure you understand what its requirements are saying, and then follow them. Notice is going to be typically required in some of the following situations, some of which I've mentioned already. But one situation might be one of the parties fails to comply with the contract or the lease. For example, if they fail to pay the rent, maybe the HVAC system isn't working properly, the tenant fails to provide the insurance coverage required, or some other violation of the lease. Another example might be, requiring notice might be the tenant exercising an option or some other right that the tenant has in the lease. Or another example might be a hazardous substance has spilled or leaked or is discovered. Maybe the buyer decides to terminate escrow and the sales contract. Maybe there's some sort of change to the law that negatively affects the premises of what's being leased. Or another example of what might require notice is if the government cites the owner or the tenant for some sort of code violation. These are just a handful of examples that may require official notice. Commercial real estate leases have lots of deadlines and time frames for when different notices must be given. Make sure you understand those and then include the delivery time within those deadlines in order to satisfy the notice deadline requirement. For example, if your landlord is halfway across the country and you have 2 days left to give them notice of a particular decision, you don't want to choose 3-day delivery. Email continues to be the standard mode of communication between parties in a business setting. However, email may not be allowed under your notices provision to count as an official notice. So you're going to want to check the contract's notice provisions. If the notice provision does not specifically permit email for notices, then an emailed notice is not going to be effective. Now, an amendment to the contract can always add email as an effective means for notice, but if email is permissible, then make sure to keep a copy of the transmission and notice of the receipt or reading in your file. The final tip I'm going to suggest to you is to make sure that you keep the other party current with your current address. If your address does change, then make sure you follow the notice requirements in the lease to notify the party of your address change. So those are a few of the basics for notices provisions in commercial real estate leases and contracts. Make sure you read the notices provision, understand it, and then follow it to a T when you have to provide official notice to the other party. Thank you for noticing this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Civignite is a commercial real estate brokerage. We serve commercial real estate buyers and sellers, investors, and commercial tenants throughout the United States, including projects in Indian country. You can find more information related to commercial real estate, along with more videos similar to this one, at our website, www.civignite.com. Due to an increasing demand for our services, Civignite is actively recruiting highly skilled and experienced commercial real estate professionals. Contact us on our website to learn more. Also, if you would like Civignite to help you buy, sell, or lease commercial real estate, please contact us on our website. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, add any comments below, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. This presentation is for general information purposes only. It is not to be construed as providing any advice, whether legal, real estate, tax, or otherwise.